host, George Miller, and I am here to talk about emotional intelligence and how that plays out in the workplace. But even more importantly, is to answer any of the questions that you have. So, any questions you have career related, there's a few ways that you can engage with me here. So I love it, of course, when you jump in directly on Zoom. And if you want, you can come off mute and just ask a question at any time. And if not, if you prefer to type into the chat, that's okay too. And if you are viewing in on LinkedIn Live or on YouTube, you can type your questions into the comment section. And I will do my best to get to those questions. So type in your questions into the comment section. And if I don't get to them while we're live, I'll get to them later in the week. So you can type your questions, and they don't have to do with the topic. You can ask anything about your resume, about interviewing, about relationships at work. What's your relationship like with your team, with your boss, etc. Questions about purpose in your career. How do you find more fulfillment at your job? Are you in the right career track? Anything is on the table here. I will probably tie it back to emotional intelligence because that is my expertise. But I have a lot of answers for other things as well, or I might be able to help refer you somewhere that you would be able to get those answers to your questions. So there's a few ways you can engage. You can type your questions into the comment section or jump in here directly on the Zoom and feel free to talk with me. What we're looking at today, our topic is about how you communicate better with deeper EQ. All right, so what does that even mean? What does having deeper EQ mean? So in relationships, at work or at home, the more that I am able to be aware of what's going on with myself, the more I'm going to be aware of what's going on with other people. And so, communication, I can learn a bunch of helpful tricks in communicating. I can learn to speak in bottom line kinds of ways if I find that kind of rambling on is an issue. I can practice communicating in bullet points. If I happen to be somebody who's in a lot of data, a position with analytics or an engineer, that kind of thing. I'm used to looking at the big picture and being able to get down into the details, and I want to give a lot of that information because I know how important it is. But if I'm communicating to people who don't have that depth of understanding about whatever topic it is, it's going to be incumbent on me to learn how to bottom line that and say, here's the 3 things I think are most important. And then they might ask questions, and then you can always respond. But you're going to want to get better at speaking in a simplified way. So that's a tactic you can do. That you can practice that, and it'll be good. However, here's where emotional intelligence comes in. So usually, the thing in the way of somebody who's used to communicating a whole lot of information, a sort of unseen thing that is blocking them from communicating in a bottom lined way, is their own discomfort. Because doing anything differently from what we have trained ourselves to do is going to be uncomfortable and is going to have feelings of fear or anxiety. I know fear can seem like a too powerful of a word, but we'll be uncomfortable. It's a little discomfort, some anxiety, maybe a little bit of hurt feelings or some irritation, like, oh, do I really have to? Why can't people understand what I'm already saying? Why do I have to change? Those kinds of questions might come in. And so emotional intelligence is really the bedrock or the foundation for better communication because I'm going to have to be aware of my feelings at a deeper level if I'm going to be as effective as I could be in my communications. If I'm going to be changing the way that I communicate so that others are understanding me better, it's going to help for me to understand my own internal and perhaps unconscious blocks to making some of those shifts. I talk about this a lot with people who refer to themselves as introverts. There's that's great that you're able to recognize that you think well when in your solitary space and where you've got things set the way you want it, and that, yeah, a lot of other people can be a distraction to you. However, if that's all that you're going to remain, if that is your MO, and that is how you are saying you are expecting everybody in the world to engage with you, you're only going to go so far. You're going to need to learn how to step into being more of an extrovert in certain scenarios. And you will feel uncomfortable with that. And if your automatic response to doing something a little differently is, I feel uncomfortable, that must mean something's wrong with me. Right there, that's where a lot of this breakdown happens when people are developing new skills in communication, is they think there's something wrong with themselves, when in fact, you're just doing something different. You're doing something you haven't done before. I like to refer to Jack Mesereau, who talks about adult learning. And he points out that adult learning new things as an adult, most of the time comes with discomfort because we're having to break our patterns of how we trained ourselves to be adults. We're having to change that, and that tends to hurt. And so we do that, and then we develop a new way of being. And it's just like going to the gym. If I'm going to build muscle, I have to first break down the muscle patterns that I already have. And then they will come back stronger, and I will have more range of motion, more ability to do things. Same thing with interactions. Same thing with my emotional intelligence. The better I get at being with my own discomfort, the better I'm going to be at communicating. And you play this game for long enough, and you start to get to the point where you actually look for that challenge, where you want to level up to the next place in your career where you have more responsibilities and where you need to be on your next edge, because it's actually invigorating. And as you've heard me talk about before, if you've listened into this, is that what makes us happy is learning and growing. You know, the goal, achieving the goal only makes us happy for a brief amount of time. And it's actually the striving for, the developing of myself that happens while I'm going for what I want. That's what actually brings happiness. It's not the money. It's not the new job title. Those things are nice and go for them, but it's so much about the journey of getting there. And so the more that I am able to be with my discomfort as I'm learning and growing, the more satisfied I'm going to be. So that is why I say that the foundation for communication, for being good at communication, for building, if we're talking about building a building here, if I'm going to improve my communications, I'm able to put in a new wing to a building or a new floor or a new balcony, whatever. All of that depends on my emotional intelligence. Now, the cool thing is a lot of people didn't realize that emotional intelligence is a skill. So for a long time, it was thought, you know what? That person's good at communicating, that other person is. That's just how that person is. Oh, I would never hire that person because they're not going to understand how to communicate with other people in a way that's going to be effective. That was a long time held belief. But we now know that emotional intelligence is a skill that anybody can develop. I talk about this with my dad. Now, my dad was one of the most emotionally distant people I had ever known. And I would not have believed that he was able to learn how to be more present with himself, with his emotions, and how to communicate his emotions more effectively with other people. But after doing work with me, quite frankly, and other coaches that I've worked with and programs I've been in, he has learned those skills. He's actually able to do stuff. And so he started doing this much later in his life, and he was able to learn new tricks, so to speak. So it is totally something that every person can learn. Anyone can increase their emotional intelligence. And that's something I'm always working on. And the more that I increase my emotional intelligence, let's say I'm kind of like off kilter and I'm not totally aligned with going to my North Star, but I shift my ability to be present with my own discomfort, I shift that a degree or two over a long time. That makes a big difference. Has me much more on purpose, has me making better progress to my goals more effectively, more efficiently. So there's all kinds of cool research on this, but I want to open up the floor to anybody who is listening in. I want to invite you to ask any questions. What questions do you have? What questions do you have about emotional intelligence or about your workplace? If you're an entrepreneur, what are your challenges? I, as an entrepreneur myself, I know that you have challenges with your business. It's just how it is. And what are those challenges? And what are you wanting? Now just think about that some as you're listening in. What do you want in your business, or what are you wanting in your career? And this is even a skill. When we talk about emotional intelligence as a skill, to be with the question of something, to allow myself to be with the discomfort of not knowing and asking, what is it that I really want? That's a huge skill. So let yourself think about that. What's really on your heart? It's surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly to you, it has a lot to do, what most people want has a lot to do with self-efficacy or improving themselves. Again, this is learning and growing. The learning how to communicate more effectively, to know that what I'm saying to other people has an impact, that I'm able to inspire and influence, and that I can achieve things that I want through interacting with people. That's actually incredibly important to people, oftentimes more than money. So, okay, cool. I see I have a hand up. Yeah, go ahead and share.
I think the challenge that I run into quite often is trying having the ability to communicate exactly what it is that I want. How do you kind of have an idea in your head, but actually manifesting the words and how they actually come out. I think a lot of people see it even when they're trying to build a resume or things of that nature. Like you know what it is, but you don't know how to actually communicate that out of your mouth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm so glad you're asking that question. I imagine a lot of people listening in can relate to that. So we'll go back and forth a little bit on this because I want to I want you to see yourself progressing with this and having something that you can do a little differently that's going to get you um, communicating what you want better. So you have the sensation in your body and thoughts in your head that, oh, this is what I want. And yet, when it comes to communicating that to other people, you find yourself stumbling over it or maybe not even speaking up because you're like, oh, I don't actually know how to say this. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay.
Or if I can go a little bit deeper, like you brought up when you say for instance for myself, I went back to school, like completed my bachelor's, got my master's, and I'm working on my MBA. But it's even though I'm building and learning and improving myself, when it comes to communicating, what is my next step? What does my future position look like? Trying to communicate, I got it in my head, but trying to communicate that to others or to even put that down on paper is quite challenging because I find myself doubting myself, feeling like, okay, am I even worth this? Am I even at this level? And knowing I am.
Yep. Okay. But you're going for what you want, and yet you're now more aware of this belief that's like, am I worth it, or how do I prove that I'm worth it?
Yes, yes, yep, that is it.
Okay. So one of the things that you're going to learn to do more of is to ask more questions while you're talking to somebody. Let's say that you're um, talking to somebody about a job position. So are you actively right now in a job search?
I'm not. I'm thinking about it. You know what I mean? I'm not there, but I'm thinking, should I? Yes.
Okay. So notice how you think that you have to be perfect in order to communicate what you want to somebody else. Just just notice that. And it's like, "Oh, I'm expecting myself to be able to say exactly what job I want and then to be able to say exactly why I am a good fit for this. And just be aware that that is a goal that you have.
Okay.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that goal, but life is way more complex than that.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so
Yes.
I hear you get that,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
we could if we wanted to put that kind of a thought process into a bucket. I'll put it into a bucket, and I'll refer to the thinker and educator Alfred Adler. Now, he talked about this kind of thing as a final fictive goal. That as human beings, we all walk around with this goal, whether we're conscious of it or not, and it's driving us. It's hugely powerful in our lives. And yet, a big problem with it is that it's fictive. It's not, it's not, it's not really grounded in reality and
Yes.
how things actually work. And so you've got this assumption about yourself. And let's just say that you spent, 3 months saying, you know what, I want to work at this company, this position, and I am going to get so good at talking about myself so that I can communicate why I am the perfect fit for this role. And there's just no way anybody's going to be able to say, actually, we're not looking for that. Well, you could go through that entire process and then miss the person who you're talking to in that interview. You could say all of this stuff and have a wonderful script, perfectly memorized. And if you do not make one-to-one contact with the person you're talking to, they're not going to hear you. So,
Understood. Yeah.
so there's now I say this though that it's still a good idea to prepare. It's still a good idea to pick a target and prepare for it. That actually helps you get depth. Where if we're talking about somebody who's going to learn a new language as an adult, can be really good for that person to watch let's say that somebody's coming over to from another country and they're going to learn English. They might pick an episode of Friends because there's a bunch of different people talking in it, and they might memorize that. And so they go real deep into communicating and being able to repeat lines from Friends and get a sense of what's going on in one episode. They might study one episode for a month to do
Mm,
a deep dive. And that
okay.
that would really help somebody learn English.
Hmm.
So it's a good thing to do if you're looking at a company and you're interested in something there, and for you to do a deep dive and talk about it and do some mock interviews. That's going to help you develop that kind of communication, that ability for you to talk about yourself in that format. And the truth of it is it's not enough. That's just one part. So, what I would recommend you doing, especially because it sounds like you're not, take advantage of the fact that you're not actively looking for something right
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
and start having these conversations with people and start saying, you know, I think I'm interested in this kind of a position at this company. What do you think about that? How do you see me? Do you, so talk to some of your closer friends about it, get their feedback. And then you can start talking to people on LinkedIn. You'll have to reach out a bunch on LinkedIn because, we're all
Hmm. Busy.
inundated with so many messages.
Hmm.
It's like you're on here because I invited you, and you're like, this one made it through your filters. And so, you know, you're here. But so you'll have to do that. You'll have to reach out on LinkedIn to some people at those companies that you're interested in. You could say, I'm interested in this company. I'd like to hear from you about what it's like working there.
Hmm.
And so part of what you're going to be doing is asking more questions as you are learning to talk about yourself and communicate your education, you communicate your successes, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Does this help?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Cool, cool. I want to underline this again. This is a way that our brain screws with our development. Is we think that we need to be perfect. Like we're going to go into our um, studio or into our cave or into our ivory tower, and we're gonna practice and we're gonna get so good and perfect that when we re-enter the world or we go to a networking event, that bam, we're just gonna blow everybody away and everyone's gonna be like, yay, here you go, like you can have whatever you want. And that is a way that our mind works, and it is false. It does not work that way. But it could be so good to catch us. And part of the reason, this is this is part of the dirty deal that runs in our unconscious mind. Part of the reason we set that sort of expectation for ourselves is because our unconscious mind wants us to fail. This is kind of upsetting stuff. Our
Wow.
unconscious mind does not want us to learn and grow at the rate that we could. And the reason for this is because our unconscious mind's primary goal is to keep us safe. And if we look at where we're at in terms of evolution, like we're already terrifying our unconscious mind like every day simply by being older and healthier and alive.
Mhm. Mhm.
It wasn't that long ago that most of us did not live past 40, 50, 60 years old. Now I mean, we've got life expectancy happening like for a lot of people that's longer. I know we got all kinds of problems. Not saying we don't
Mhm.
have issues, certainly do, but it's a different kind of issue than we were having 800 years ago, 1,000 years ago. So all of our minds, every human being on planet Earth right now, what is it? What are we up to? 8 billion? All 8 billion of us are like freaked out about our own development. So, our unconscious mind seeks to put in blocks, and one of them is that we overestimate ourselves. We think we need to be perfect before we can really do something. And then when we do take a bit of a risk and we go out and we try something new and then it doesn't go how we thought it should go, then we criticize the living crap out of ourselves and we say, see what happens when you take that kind of a risk? See, you don't really matter. Isn't it funny you thought you were worth it? And we say a bunch of mean stuff to ourselves. And this is true for everybody. I have not worked with one person who is not their own biggest critic. So, that have that land for you, however it lands for you, for everybody listening in. It can just be really good to notice how you criticize yourself. Don't pretend like you're not. That doesn't actually help. And just to recognize, wow, these are the ways I criticize myself. Wow, I criticize myself for this, and this. Then, once you're more honest about how you criticize yourself, you can do more about it. You can start to make these little adjustments. And this is why I say again, emotional intelligence is the foundation. Emotional intelligence is your bedrock of, of who you are and how you're going to develop. So, okay, got it. So yeah, I see that you are relating and that you say that you criticize yourself a lot. Totally. That's a survival mechanism. We have to criticize ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. I would never say to somebody, no, don't criticize yourself. Just stop it totally all at once. No, you die. That's like we criticize ourselves because it helps keep us alive. We live in a dangerous world. We just do. Cars drive by quickly. You think about mundane dangers of life. Like if you're going to cross the street, you need to be able to say to yourself, like, oh, nope, don't go, or whoa, look at that. That was kind of silly. You were looking at your phone and not at traffic. That's a good thing to criticize yourself for. So it's not about not criticizing yourself, but it's about being aware of your criticisms and noticing which ones are serving you and which ones aren't. Because there's a bunch that aren't. And with time, you will shift how you criticize yourself. You will get much more loving in your criticisms towards yourself. You will understand that you're a magnificent creature and that part of you criticizing yourself is to help you develop, and you will get more strategic with those self-criticisms and have you um, doing things that you thought you couldn't do that you always really wanted to do. So, I think there's a lot with what you shared that we can dig into more. I want to do a quick room recap here, but I'll keep going on this one. What you brought up about knowing that you want more, but not knowing how to communicate it. There is a lot of meat in that. There's a lot to dig into. So, for everybody who's listening in and anybody who's just joined in recently, this is Career Lab Wednesday. I'm your host, George Miller. I'm here almost every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. Central Time, and I invite all questions career related. Could be anything about your resume, interviewing, talking to people, talking to coworkers, talking to your boss, talking to your team, any kind of challenges. And I know there are challenges because you are alive on planet Earth. And part of being alive and on planet Earth means that you are having challenges. So anything that's on your heart that you want to ask that's somewhat career related, feel free to ask. Oh, cool. I'm getting a question here. Not a native speaker, and I'd love to learn how to communicate better in a formal environment and how to introduce myself without losing attention. Whoa. Thank you for asking that question. That's great. So, not a native English speaker, and you want to introduce yourself in a formal environment without losing attention. Okay, there's several things that you're going to do. One of them I mentioned a little bit ago is pick an episode. You could pick Simpsons or Friends. Probably Friends is better. But something where there's something that's kind of fun and interesting to you and that has a lot of different communications going on. So a lot of different characters. And I think Friends is a good one because, and maybe Seinfeld, because there is a lot of back and forth. So there's a lot of dialogue. And so this is going to be more of your left brain activity of you is memorizing and practicing saying what they're saying. You know, getting your tongue to like go in new directions. It's a pain in the butt. So just getting that practice going. And of course, there's all kinds of apps and things. I know there's Duolingo, and there's a bunch now. And I think especially with AI that will be able to help you practice. So that's one approach that you're going to take. That's going to get you more confident in your ability to make your tongue into the shapes that you need to make it to say words with more of an American or in English if you're in somewhere else accent. Now, this other piece though that you put in here, introduce yourself without losing attention. I'm so glad you said that because I don't think that you having an accent is actually what has you losing people's attention. I suspect that the reason you lose people's attention is because you leave yourself. You stop giving yourself attention. You start criticizing yourself for the way that you're saying something in the moment, and you are immediately apologetic and saying something like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Even if you're not saying "I'm sorry" out loud, you are probably communicating "I'm sorry." And right there, then, you're training people to not pay attention to you. And so you're going to have to do some work on yourself in your emotional intelligence, in your foundation. You're going to have to do some stuff to choose that you matter, that you're worth it, and that you're going to be on your own side. Because honestly, as somebody who speaks with a lot of people, someone's talking to me and they have an accent and they're not speaking English perfectly, doesn't matter to me. Now, if somebody if it's really hard for me to understand, then yeah, I find myself, it's a challenge. And because I'm trained in this stuff, I know that I need to slow down myself a little bit and really stay focused with that person. And so it can be, if I wasn't aware of that, I might experience some irritation. And if I was unconscious of that, I would probably spill that out onto you. And I would probably do or say something or communicate in kind of a way that was a little bit hurtful to you. And it might not be because I'm like intentionally trying to mess with you, but it would be just out of my own discomfort, out of my own insecurities and sense of, oh, I don't really know how to be with this person right now. So, that is one thing. You do need to get yourself to a point where you can communicate clearly enough that people would be able to understand you without doing a whole lot of work internally to be present with you. So that is true. Well, but a lot of people I talk to, people who say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my English isn't good." I'm like, I understand what you're saying perfectly. Like, I don't need you to speak with an American accent perfectly. Doesn't matter to me. Just really doesn't. I mean, as much as in this country we, have all kinds of immigration issues, fine, but we're also a country that is built on people coming to this land and integrating themselves. So that, like, there's a way that is just, that's an American thing. And people will give you a little bit of a hard time, but if you can have more of a sense of self and a sense that you matter, that you're worth it, you don't have to speak perfect English. Again, depending on what your career is, maybe you're going to spend more time on that, depending on where you live. There's a lot of variables here. But anyway, okay, I see that. So you're responding, yeah, you do notice, that's true. When you tend to criticize yourself a lot. When I'm speaking, you'll notice a mistake or feel like I'm not being clear, and then I get frustrated and lose focus. It's hard to stay confident when that happens. Totally. Yeah. You know, again, you don't have to be confident about how you're communicating. You're not communicating perfectly. You are making mistakes. And that's fine. So notice when you're criticizing yourself then for not being confident, it's like, geez, how are you going to win with that? So you're going to get better at saying things like, let me know if when I'm talking, you don't understand something I'm saying. That would be very helpful to me. I am learning to speak a new language, and I appreciate any feedback you give me. If I say a word that, you didn't understand what I was saying, let me know. And just bring it out. Just have that be a way that you communicate to somebody else, here's a way you can help me. Because we all like to help people. So, and if you're talking with somebody who doesn't want to help you, well, then then it makes it clear and you can stop that interaction. So, but underneath this, and the thing I want to get to about emotional intelligence and that being the foundation is you're going to have to start saying things to yourself in an internal kind of way of, wow, here I am in a new environment. What a badass I must be that I am taking on the kinds of communications that I'm doing. And this is foreign to me. Here I am doing this. Wow. Isn't it so cool that I'm like in touch with the fact that I'm uncomfortable and then I'm taking these risks? So you're going to be changing your internal dialogue so that, yeah, you're going to criticize yourself some. You're like, oh, oops, I made a mistake there. Oh, okay, cool. But yeah, It's great that I'm going for it. And you're going to also use the discomfort and use your feeling of feeling anxious, afraid, feeling hurt, feeling frustrated. You're going to, instead of indict yourself about that stuff, you're going to appreciate the fact that you're feeling those emotions, because those emotions are the bedrock for you developing yourself. Those emotions give you such high quality data about what is happening in an interaction. So you're going to criticize yourself less for when you're feeling uncomfortable, and you're going to applaud yourself for the fact that you're feeling uncomfortable, because you should be feeling uncomfortable. You're in a new environment and you have challenges in that environment. And that discomfort is alerting you to things, is helping you be more conscious of any mistakes that you are making. You don't have to pretend you're not making mistakes. Ah, good, good, good. Okay, so this is making sense. Awesome. And this is doable. It's uncomfortable, but doable. So I want you to be more aware of your primary feelings: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, and joy. By simply noticing what you're feeling and allowing yourself to feel that, you will be affirming yourself instead of putting yourself down for who you are. So just practice that. Get started with that. Ah, good. I'm seeing your next question coming in. How do I stop that internal criticism? Feels automatic, especially when I know I've made a mistake. That's it. You don't stop the internal criticism. That's like, that's a fantasy. To say, oh, I'm not going to criticize myself anymore, it just doesn't exist. And and for good reason. If you didn't criticize yourself, you would die. Or you would make all kinds of mistakes that would have big implications. There are some people I coach who don't criticize themselves enough. I know that might kind of sound weird to say, but it's like they criticize themselves about the wrong things. So we want to get people looking objectively at themselves, so that internal critic can have a useful direction, that there can be something valuable about that, because that's just how it is. Yeah, 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 yeah. Good. So you are not alone. Don't give up on working towards bettering yourself. Totally. Yeah. As you are becoming more aware of yourself, you will do a better job with your internal criticisms. And you'll be able to embrace that part of yourself as perhaps a loving parent. Say, oh, wow, isn't it cool that I'm looking out for myself in that way? That I'm like, nope, here, go back and try it again better this way. So you're changing your internal critic instead of trying to get rid of it. I guess I've been too focused on being perfect, and that's made it harder for me to relax and just speak. Wow. Well said. You just bottom lined everything that I was talking about. So I know that you have this within you, that you are able to communicate well, just with what you said. Yeah, you know, being too focused on being perfect instead of learning to relax a little bit and speak and be with the fact that you're making mistakes. So here, that now that we're at this point, it can be very helpful to take on an EQ assignment for yourself, an emotional intelligence assignment for yourself. Because again, our goal here is that we are building our foundation. We are fortifying our bedrock so that whatever we build on top of that has more that it can rely on. So, an emotional intelligence assignment that you could experiment with given our interaction here is to take on celebrating mistakes. Okay? So if you're talking with somebody and you think that you just pronounced something wrong, and you might then say to yourself inside, "Oh, good job, you made a mistake." Or you might even say it out loud and say, "Did I say that? Did I say that funny? Is that not how you say it?" And they say, "Oh yeah, no, you say it like this." You go, "Oh, cool, good. I'm so glad I made that mistake and then asked that question because I'm learning now." So you're going to take on celebrating the mistakes that you make. So if you go to a networking event or you said a formal event somewhere and you're talking with people just check in with yourself. You go to the bathroom and look at yourself in the mirror and be like, "Whoa, way to go. You made a bunch of mistakes out there. Oh, I love that you said that. That yes, that it's not about being perfect. It's about relaxing into yourself and speaking up, allowing yourself to make mistakes because it is only through making mistakes that we learn as adults." That's upsetting. And think about that. We're already, Jack Mesmer says that childhood is about formation. We're in a hypnagogic state. It's like we're in sort of this dream space and our brains are so open, our beings are so open to so much stuff and we're just downloading and all that's getting encoded. And so when we make mistakes as little kids, we're different about it. We're like, you can look at a little kid and they just make a mistake and they're right back up at it, like, "Oh, oops, ha ha ha," like whatever. Like, so that kind of thing is going on. And then as we get older, we get more fixed. And there's good reason for that. We don't have to criticize ourselves for that. But we get to this spot then where this is how we think of ourselves. We think we have this set personality, etc. And in order to shift that, in order to learn and grow, in order to expand our personality, to take in new behaviors and using new behaviors, we have to make mistakes. We have to have breakdowns. And like, nobody wants to look bad. Nobody wants to make a mistake publicly. That is so upsetting and disturbing. And yet, it is required for us to learn and grow. I do speaking events. I make many mistakes every time I do that. I make so many mistakes here. I just, tracking back, like my tongue got tied up and I said a few words wrong. And I was like, "Ooh, all right, George, slow down, take a breath, get grounded, come back to yourself." So, learning to celebrate your mistakes is key for you developing faster as an adult because you're going to have to make mistakes. And celebrating the mistake helps you learn from that mistake better. Just beating the living crap out of yourself for making a mistake does not help you learn better. I hope that's helpful. I'm so glad you said what you'll work on that. Feels like it makes a big difference. Yeah, yeah. Let us know. Join us next week or reach out to me directly and let me know. So, oh, dang, we're coming up on the end of the hour. So there's a few ways you can engage with me outside of this. You can set up a one-to-one with me. I've got a link to my calendar where we'll talk for 15, 20 minutes. I'm often able to help you get some clarity there. And if a coaching relationship is something that makes sense, we can talk about that as well. Then, if you are wanting to learn more about yourself and how to communicate more effectively with other people, there's a pretty quick personality assessment you can take. It'll take you about 10, 15 minutes to do the assessment. And then there's a 10-minute video that you can watch that is really focused on helping you identify other personality styles so that you can shift your style a little bit and communicate with that other person. I'm so glad we're talking about languages today because that's what it is. We don't just have um, uh, French, German, Chinese, Italian, English, um, Japanese, um, Africanese, or South Afrikaans. I forgot how to say that one. Anyway, you get the idea. We have lots of different languages in that kind of way, but we also have different communication patterns, different styles of communicating, different personality languages. And those come into four basic buckets. There's a ton of research on this stuff. Many of you have probably taken DISC or Myers-Briggs or Hogan. They're great, the good stuff. The one that I'm talking about and why I want you to take it is because the focus of it is about learning how to communicate more effectively with other people. So you get a sense of yourself, understanding of your style, but then there's some tricks about how to develop your language with other people. So take a look at that. That's a lot of fun. And then you can also, well, if you're here in Chicago, I am doing breath work on the beach and going into the water. So I'm calling it the Power Within. It's a fantastic way to build your emotional intelligence because going into cold water requires that I be present with my fear, requires that I be present sometimes with my anger. I've taken some people in, and sometimes their response is just to like get really mad and yell a lot. It's cool. It's like, whoa, all right. They were able to access that, and then they're able to integrate that into their lives in a way that instead of being passive aggressive, they can channel their aggression in a useful way. So there's all kinds of cool little things that ice water does. I'm taking people in and take a look at that if you're in Chicago or if you want to come from out of town. Check it out. I'll be doing that. I'm doing it now, even though the water is not totally cold, just to help people get prepared. So you do the breath work, you get used to going into the water, and it's beautiful. It's the freaking lake. So check that out. And if you want more information about emotional intelligence courses, I have a bunch of them. They are group sessions, and there's nobody that would be, unless you've done a lot of personal growth work already, you wouldn't just jump right into them. We would do a few sessions before at least to get you kind of caught up and realizing what it will be like to be in one of these um, pretty intense groups. So if you have interest in that, check it out. That's on my website too. I've got EQ Accelerator and the Foundations of EQ, and then there's another one, Transformation Lab. Okay, so that's a few ways to connect with me. We've got a few minutes left. I could certainly say more about some emotional intelligence things here, but I want to check in. Does anybody have anything on your heart, any questions or anything that you're wanting support with before I wrap up today? Anything that you want to know about in terms of your workplace, your relationships at work, or your purpose in your career, your drive, what matters to you, any challenges that you have, anything that you're working on that you want some support with. Just go ahead and type it into the comment section, and I'll do my best to give you a response. I'll keep talking for a little bit here, so feel free to jump on in, come off mute if you want, or type into the chat or comment section and let me know. So we've got, I'll recap stuff. What we talked about today is the internal criticism. So when we're communicating, something that's often in our way is that we are criticizing ourselves ineffectively. We're shutting ourselves down before we give ourselves the opportunity to speak up and make mistakes. Too often we assume that we have to be perfect before we can take action. It just doesn't work that way. You will hold yourself back so much in life if you're always waiting to be perfect. And then at the end of life, you'd be like, geez, I wasted a lot of time. I did not live my life as fully as I could have. So something that really helps with this is to celebrate your mistakes, to know you're going to make mistakes, and then when you make the mistake, celebrate it. Even if you're like, oh, geez, I so wish I didn't make that mistake. The truth is, you will make a lot more progress in your life and you'll be a lot happier. There's all kinds of stats on this, like Babe Ruth, home run king, was also the strikeout king. Michael Jordan missed more shots than anybody else at that point in time. It's just, well, maybe not anybody else, but a lot of people. He did not have the highest percentage of made shots. So you're going to make mistakes, and learning to celebrate that will help you a lot when you're talking about yourself. If you're in an interview and you're able to say, oh yeah, they ask you that question. Everybody's least favorite question is tell me about yourself. And maybe the second least favorite is tell me about a mistake you made, or tell me about the time that something didn't work well. It's such an opportunity for you to say, oh yeah, this project came in and I made the mistake of thinking I could handle it in this kind of way, and I didn't do enough research, and I didn't make enough contact with key players, and we just were not able to get that project off the ground. And my goodness, that was quite a learning experience for me, that of how important it is to get all the key players aligned. So that kind of thing. And then you can take it into, and I'm imagining at this position, here are the people I'm going to have to be talking to and making sure I have got a really good relationship with in order to make this thing that I'm being hired for a success. So it's about how you communicate way more than it is about being perfect, about being able to say, I made a mistake. I did this with a client the other day. We got off to a rocky start. I was trying to help them, but we didn't take enough time to really get clear on the goals. And I just said, wow, oops. you know, I think I would have learned from that mistake. I've been coaching now for a while. I know how important it is to get clear about goals up front. You know, but I made a mistake. I kind of went with what your perceived agenda was, and we didn't get totally clear. My bad. Let's talk about it. What can we do to address this? And that provides the security. That kind of interaction is going to help things. So being able to admit mistakes and celebrate them is a big deal. All right. Well, we are at the end of our time here. So I'm going to be signing off. Again, you can set up a one-to-one with me. Happy to talk with you 15 to 20 minutes, get a sense of where you're at, quite possibly help you get clarity and take the next steps you need. If not, we can talk about what a coaching relationship might look like. So go ahead and set up a time with me and check out the things on my website. I've got the personality assessment you can do, and I've also got some fun programs that will help you develop your emotional intelligence. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining in. And to everybody who shared, thank you so much. Your questions are the fuel for this time that we have here together. So I really appreciate you asking the questions that you asked and being vulnerable, saying that you don't know stuff and that you've got challenges. That's very helpful. Really gives us the stuff that we need here to propel this live event forward. So thank you. Take care, everyone.